for this afternoon session on healthy living for the future. My name is Eric Wang. I'm just going to be moderating for this particular panel. We have two guest speakers. The first speaker will be Dr. Jeffrey Mark, who will tell us about aging and longevity. So Dr. Mark has been a 5-board certified physician, and he's been practicing medicine in the past 25 years, focusing on how to help individuals achieve better, healthy, and high-quality lives. Okay, Dr. Mark, I'll give you the floor.
Oh, thank you. Good to see everybody here. I know I'm competing after your lunch, or some of you still have lunch there. If you'd like to, you could move up a little bit closer since we're a smaller group. Then Eric doesn't have to run back and forth with the mic as much. Although I'm sure he doesn't mind the exercise after lunch. Okay. Hope you're all doing pretty well today. I'm going to be talking today on longevity, performance, and health. And people have asked me, well, why did you pick those topics? What does it have to do with like a smart city and other types of venues? Well, the smart city, of course, you know, the city is designed for people, and people that are living in the city need certain types of access to health care, and their health care and their health needs are very specific. So we're going to talk about longevity because people are living longer, as you know, and we're able to get people to live to a longer state as well. And then we're also going to look at performance because you just don't want to be getting older. You want to be able to, as your peak performance, being able to live longer, be productive, and do what you want to do. And then you want to maintain your health. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so that one moves. My slides don't move. Hold on one second. Okay, it's okay. I just have a smaller view of it. So you can see this data is from Scientific American, the October 2022 edition. You can see a little dip off there. This is the U.S. Population life expectancy. And we're not going to talk about that little dip. It's a little bit of COVID, a little bit of drug toxicities and other things like that. But the general trend has been increasing. So we know that if you're going to design, you know, a city or work with people, the longevity aspect is going to be going higher. But the problem is, as we get older, I mean, there's lots of things that happen, but these are some of the mild things that some of you out there that are high performance, high productive people can experience. And that includes issues with memory, which implies function, because we all want to have to be as sharp and be able to function at our peak years. And also weight gain, which represents energy or metabolism or energy needs start to go down. So these are aspects that, you know, occur with longevity or a consequence of aging. And then finally, sleep, which is your regenerative state. So your ability to regenerate your mind during delta sleep and other aspects got to go down as well. So you want to try to address these because, you know, what's the point of having more length of time or without the quality and being able to perform what you want to do? So these solutions we're going to be talking about, and they include talking about addressing the root causes of inflammation, mitochondria, and all these aspects that lead to cellular damage and to organ problems as well. And then we're going to be talking about senescence, this new thought of cells that become older and no longer functional. They're like zombie cells almost. They're producing things that make the rest of the body older. So, and then we're going to talk about 5 things that you can do now in terms of good practices, in terms of maintenance of health. So we're going to cover all these areas. Let's see if I can. Okay. So this is in a graphic form of looking at anti-aging regenerative medicine. And that is... sorry about that. The slides don't seem to match here, but I can work off from there. That's fine. So we're going to talk about these 3 things specifically here: is why we age, and then what happens with the regenerative medicine, how we can repair things that we need that start to go down, and then we want to do health maintenance as well. So this is in the graphical form of what we're talking about. The bottom, of course, are the 5 pillars of general health, and they found foundational things, and we'll talk about that, so they can do that and put that into practice. These are things that you should be doing now. The second tier are people that have issues either with diabetes, insulin resistance, may have arthritis, memory issues, things that are starting to impact your life, and we can have other ways of doing things besides just medications, and those are listed there. And then at the very peak is getting that peak performance, aging less in terms of decelerating the aging process, and actually having some reversal as well. So we've been talking about all that. So for my background, I started having 3 milestones that really brought to my attention about medicine and my calling for helping people. It started when I was 11, and I had pneumonia. It was mycoplasma pneumonia, which was not known. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. They pumped me full of penicillin. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Then finally somebody said, well, why don't you try erythromycin? So that's what really got me interested in medicine and thinking outside the box. And then secondly, after I finished internal medicine in medical school and got boarded in gastroenterology, I still had people that I couldn't quite help with just conventional medicine. So we had people in the family that had problems with eczema, inflammation, issues with mold, toxicity. So all these areas, required something outside the box, and that's where I went into functional medicine and regenerative medicine. And then finally, for myself, I've had issues for a few years, with stress and being a physician and being on call and everything, having blood pressure. I've got some exposures with mold myself, and mercury toxicity. So that's when I started looking at this reversal process. How can I kind of reverse this process in terms of what's happened to me? So a lot of things that I'm going to be sharing with you today are aspects that you can take and that we now know from studies that we have now available. So this is Jean Clement. The reason I bring her up is because she was recorded the oldest person, 120, 121 years. So we know that this is at least where we can get to for some people, but they're maybe at the extreme. We can actually increase lifespan. And it's hard to do studies because they'd be long-term, but in animal models, a mouse would normally at age 1.5 years or 2 years be pretty old. You can see the mouse on your left that would basically have this be hairless, bent spine, and develop cataracts. And they expressed the normal genes. They had the normal aging, and there's this P16 gene. But if you suppress the gene, the product that it produces, then you get the mouse on the left there. So that mouse is the same age, but it's had these other types of what we call markers or phenotype markers removed. So you can see quite a difference. It looks just as it did maybe at month 2 or 3 or 6 when it was actually more closer to its prime. So we're going to look at why we age. There's a few factors that you listed here. I'm not going to go through every single one, but the main one that people think about is telomeres. And the way to think about it is if you had a shoelace, there's the cap on the shoelace that keeps things together, and it starts to unravel or get shorter as you get older. That's the traditional thought. But there's actually more to it than that. There's a lot more things in theory and about aging, and all these do play a factor and a role, but I'm going to show you that there's one that's been more recent and overriding, and that's this idea of senescence. But so we're just going to talk about that briefly. So there's another concept that I'm just going to talk about just for a minute. It's called epigenetics. So this is your expression. So you can have the genes because your genes are like a digital library, and then what you check out or what you transcribe or read is what your body makes or enables to go through. So what happens is that if you can have the genes, but if they don't get expressed, then you don't have that particular problem, or that ability doesn't occur. So there's this concept of something in the environment or toxins that expose your body, and then you get the expression of these genes. So a classic one that could be problematic for some people are like with gluten. There's various degrees of expression of certain genes that have problems with gluten. And celiac disease and other things. So that's one of the things there. So inflammation is what is a major cause as well. So you can see all these things are aging factors. There's something called advanced glycation end products as well, and these are things that basically cause inflammation. So if you avoid these types of foods and lipids and things that cause inflammation, then you can avoid aging as well. And the end result is mitochondrial damage. So we're going to talk a little bit about senescence in the next few slides as well, and we'll talk about regenerative medicine. So I'm going to introduce you to this lady here, Anna Schnepper. The reason I mentioned her here is that she also lived quite long, but she had a relative, I think it was a nurse that was one of her nieces, and they agreed to let her go ahead and have an autopsy to figure out, okay, well maybe science can figure out, what's, what makes her tick. And in fact, it's very interesting. She was down to almost like no stem cells, and stem cells are what helps regenerate our body. They're the kind of like a blueprint or the engineer that comes in and reconstructs things, like from a city or something. So we're going to look at this area here. So personal medicine is actually addressing a number of things, which is the inflammation I told you about, and then also about regeneration. And these are what stem cells can do. So this is looking at the future, and they're also available, although there's certain restrictions here in the US. But these are what stem cells can do. They can regenerate, and then Sheppel, she basically ran out of stem cells. So let me tell you here about platelet-rich plasma as well, and then we're going to concentrate a little bit on peptides. So peptides are signaling messengers that are amino acids. They're 50 amino acids long, and they also have insulin, for example, is a peptide. So that's one of these as well, and there's lots of uses for these as well. This is thymosin beta-4 is an example of a peptide. So we use these in regenerative medicine as well. These are studies on nutrients. This is epicatchin, because there's a problem when we get older, we get less muscle mass, and this is what happens when a lot of people need more muscular, because muscle actually is valuable in terms of time. And so what happens here is that there's actually things that can inhibit muscle inhibitors so that you actually make more muscle as you get older. And so this is all signaling. I'm going to skip a little bit to the senescent part from our friend here. So this is what I was talking about. There's cells that produce these types of signaling proteins. The cells get damaged, become senescent, and then they release these particles. And it influences the cells around them. So all the cells then become more like, not quite zombified, but they're basically not able to function. So if you remove these cells, that's where you're going to be able to get the benefit. So there's a couple studies using dasatinib and quercetin. They're not showing longevity, but they're showing that you can remove these senescent cells, and that there's benefit that people can get in terms of like kidney disease and things as well. So in the last minute or so, I'm just going to talk about what you can do in terms of things that you can, best practices that you can do now based on blue zones and other studies. So we all know who this is, Queen Elizabeth II. So these are some of the factors that people have found that helped her live quite a bit and be productive. First is you want to make sure you have a purpose. So Mark Twain said it best when he says the two most important days of your life are the day you are born and the day you know why. So that's very important to be able to have that. The sense of community is what's needed as well for these blue zones that shown long life. Exercise, and then eating well. Specifically, the GI tract, the gut, is most important because that's where a lot of your gut integrity occurs. And if there's leakiness in the gut, there's leakiness in the brain, and you can get other antibodies and other things to form. So people get autoimmune disease, thyroid disease, and other things as well. So there's a process that you can do to help this as well. I'm going to skip all these because I'm going to give you all these as a resource. Sleep is very important. You want to get 78 hours of sleep because that's where you're going to regenerate and detoxify your brain. And these are all things that I'm going to give you resources on at the end. So you can click on the QR code, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. And balancing hormones is very important as well. Not just the sex hormones, but stress and the adrenal hormones as well. So these are other topics that I didn't cover today because it was a short, brief overview, but hopefully you got a sense of what anti-aging regenerative medicine is and what we do and can do now, and the importance of now senescence and reversal of senescence that we have available. So this is the resources that give you additional information that I didn't get to cover, intermittent fasting and other things like that. So you can take a picture of that, scan it, or there's on the front table, there's several sheets that you can scan as well, and that will give you this link to our website. Okay, and with that, I thank you, and we'll probably have a panel discussion after the next speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. Boy, I can't accept that we have to, not surf and watch TV in bed. That's okay. Thank you. So, Dr. Mark will join us later for the panel discussion, and what we have next up is Dr. Anil Raman who's going to tell us about sleeping and the brain. So I think it's really a good segue to have Dr. Mark emphasizing on sleep as well. So give me 1 second here to set you up. I think we just press it.
Okay. Everyone's sleepy after lunch, maybe? Okay, so I don't know what to talk about. I'm just going to go over a couple things, way to think about stuff. So we approach sleep differently. We approach everything differently. We focus on the brain. So everyone here looks pretty much the same to me. Like no one stands out. The one's paying attention, the one's not paying attention. They all look the same. You all seem okay, but there's a hidden order to the brain. And if I map your brain, I can tell which of you are suffering. I can tell which of you are anxious, which of you are a little depressed, which of you are struggling to get by, kind of losing their memory. And you can tell. And you can't tell by looking at them. All the people you have dinner with, they all look the same. But if you map their brain, you can tell. So there's a hidden order to the brain. And so what we do is we base everything on restoring that order. And when we restore the order, you're calmer, you're happier, you're more focused, you feel balanced and grounded, you have good mental acuity, you're less irritable, you're patient, and you sleep better, as a virtue as well. So, where's your heart? Everyone have a heart? It's right here, right? But you can feel the pulse in your foot. You can feel the pulse in your hands. You can feel the pulse in your head. And if it's not a good pulse, the doctor's going to say, oh, it's a weak pulse. Or they'll say it's a nice bounding pulse, right? So if everything's intact, it should go everywhere. Anyway, just keep that in mind as we go through this. So, I'm going to just go over this hidden order and so see if you understand it. And first of all, when you run an EEG, you've got 80 billion neurons. I'm not sure if you know that. You have 80 billion neurons. And under, each of those neurons are firing at different speeds. Some are firing slow, some are firing fast, and everything in between, right? And the ones that are firing slow are the ones here in the bottom, delta. And do you see delta waves? Normally in slow wave sleep, in small kids, they're growing under the age of 12, they're making growth hormone, leave me alone. When you're older, we have some, not as much. Usually, we clear out our amyloid and tau so we don't get demented. Anyway, that's the delta waves. And then theta waves they're a little bit faster, right? They operate a little bit faster. They can be an ultra state of relaxation, but usually it's like a brain fog. You're sleepy, you're fatigued. You know, maybe you listen to a song, but you don't hear the lyrics. Maybe you walk into a room and you forget what you're supposed to get. Maybe you play a ball sport, but you don't see the pattern the ball makes as it comes to you. Maybe you're not quite there. And then there's alpha. And the talk is called The Importance of Alpha. That's the best zone. Because when you close your eyes and you relax and you're alert, you make alpha. That's meditation. Alpha is meditation. I'm not sure if you knew that. All that Muse headband and everything, they're tracking your alpha. So alpha is what you want to be in. And then there's beta, and then there's gamma too. Those are the fast neurons. They're like problem-solving, intense concentration. But on the flip side, it could be anxiety. Like it could be fireflies trapped inside a glass jar, bouncing on the walls. So what frequency you operate in determines, like a puppet on a string, how you act. Let's keep going. So a typical EEG, when you draw an EEG, is all of it, right? Just one big jumbled mess, and all you see is all of it. And the neurologist will say, you don't have seizures. You know, that's it. That's about all they're going to say, right? But what you could do is a fast Fourier transform. You can break up. This is a tech crowd, right? So maybe you guys know. Anyway, you guys know what a fast. You can break up that signal, and you can say, hey, okay, I got 20 electrodes, under every electrode 4 billion neurons. How many of those neurons are firing in the delta range? Slow. How many of them are firing in theta? A little bit faster. How many of them are firing in alpha? A little bit faster. And how many of them are firing in beta? A little after. And so I'm going to go back to my heart. So you have your heart here, and you can feel that pulse everywhere, right? Well, when you close your eyes, you make alpha. Okay? Close your eyes. You're supposed to make alpha. And you know where you make it? You make it in the back of the head. Just like God didn't stick the heart in the middle. Who knows why He stuck it up here? Didn't stick the alpha here. Stuck it in the back of the head. And if the hardware of your brain is intact and the software of your brain is intact, the hardware is the wiring, if your brain is wired properly. And the software of your brain is intact. I'm defining software as stress. That stress could be something physiologic, like you have lupus or some other, illness, or it could be a mental stress, like you're psychotic, manic or something, whatever, right? Anyway, as long as the wiring is intact, the hardware and the software, you're not too stressed out, that alpha should beautifully propagate from the back of the head to the front of the head. Okay? And so what you would see is, here's a person 3 years apart. So if you look at this, I'm not sure if you see my cursor, but going from the bottom to top, that's the occipital leads, that's the parietal leads, that's the temporal leads, and these are the frontal leads. And so the bottom to top is the back of the head to the front of the head. Okay? Left to right is the frequency. This person has their eyes closed. And at the very bottom, they created alpha. At the bottom. And you can see that this person beautifully transmitted that alpha to the very top. It's balanced. So what you want is balance in everything. You want balance in your posture. You want balance in your facial profile, the fifths, the facial thirds. You want balance in your brain. If your brain is imbalanced, you will balance an imbalanced brain with an imbalanced lifestyle. So I never tell people stop smoking pot, stop drinking, stop taking those, Ambiens and whatever, because they need it, because their brain's not balanced. And that's why they don't stop doing it if you tell them to. But if you balance their brain, and you have a balance, I couldn't give this person an Ambien. He wouldn't want it. I couldn't give this person ADHD drugs. Wouldn't want it. Smoking pot. So anyway, it's a way of thinking about things. Don't think of it in terms of diagnoses, but think of it in terms of the brain. So that's why you know, we see people from all over, people with mental health illnesses, anxiety, depression, ADHD, people with neurologic stuff, memory loss, you know, whatnot, and people with everything in between. So here's a person, here's a 9-year-old boy with ADD, and usually what we see there is the alpha is lost in the very front. You see the top 2 peaks are missing compared to the others, at least relatively. Here's a person with brain fog. This person has, I believe, 7 companies he owns. But, you know, he has a little bit of alpha at the very bottom where it starts, but it doesn't propagate at all. This is a person, it's a grandma, and she's slowing down. Her main alpha peak is shifting to the left. And she came in complaining, I can't find my words as well. This is a person who's a Super Bowl MVP, got hit on the head a lot, right? And lost some of his alpha. This is a girl with sleep apnea. You see how thick it is on the left? You gotta think of sleep apnea as a concussion. Every time you stop breathing, every time it fragments your sleep, it stuns you. And it causes neuronal slowing, and you get a lot of delta and theta, all that slowing, and it robs you of the alpha. There's a woman with anxiety. She has a lot of beta. You see how thick it is on the right? People think I'm a fortune teller. I just look at their map and I explain what they're like. There's a person with concussions. They fell off a rock and hit the ground, and you can see the second band on the left side a little bit that's emerging. And just to show you, the alpha doesn't change much. Here's a 96-year-old, nice alpha. Okay. Anyway, just to show you, there's different things you can do. Actually, I think I'm done. I'll just go from there. So we just aim to restore it. These are like the examples, but it's a way of looking at things. You know, if you're anxious, if you're depressed, if you're ADD-ish, if you have reduced mental acuity, if you're falling a lot, look at the brain. Oh, no, there's no question.
We have a question. Actually, you know, why don't we? This is actually a great segue to our next session. So we're actually going to start our marketing at a Bay Area biotechnology firm, and Dr. Lee is a practicing physician, and Nikki is the CEO of a startup company in health and longevity. Okay, so welcome. Why don't I open up with some of the questions we have from the audience? I mean, thank you, first of all, for both of you on your talks. They're really fascinating. I feel like I now have more questions than I started with. Maybe that's where you want to get all of us here. So I think there was a question from the audience. Okay, I'm going to run down.
There's not that many people here I can talk. I'm a retired pediatric private duty special care nurse my whole career, and a newborn nurse in Hawaii before that. And I just learned on my iPhone 14 they're linking insomnia to all kinds of these problems that we're talking about, sleep deprivation. I just wondered what your thoughts were. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone want to take that? So I think it's probably for you, Dr. Rama, about sleep.
Insomnia. Insomnia, they said on my iPhone this morning, was linked to all kinds of problems. In bipolar, I'm allergic to 11 drugs. I can't take them. I hallucinated on olanzapine a few months ago, and it was terrifying. Not like when I tried LSD when I was 20. I'm 74 now. And I'm just fascinated with, there's so many mental health issues. And my client I was speaking of, she had a rare genetic syndrome, and she was awake all the time. And, you know, She was fat, and she made it to 21. She was never expected to survive, but she definitely did not sleep much. She kept her parents awake all night long.
I mean, I'm not sure how to answer that, but insomnia could be anything. I mean, it could be caused by anything. It's definitely linked to mental illness, absolutely. You know, mental illness, in some cases, just like a neurodegenerative condition, schizophrenia, and some of these others.
Well, what about biochemical? Because I have a genetic component of that in my family.
I mean, you just have to methodically go through A, B, C, D, and you just don't know what you're doing. And sometimes insomnia is protective. Sometimes you wake up because your body doesn't want you to sleep too. So, you know, you have to keep that in mind.
Well, you can't sleep because you feel like you're stoned on amphetamines. I found out I have to really be really tired, and then I have the best chance of prolonged sleep.
It sounded like it reminds me of one of the slides from Dr. Mark, where at the very bottom he says, "Keep your TV and your phone away from you.
Yeah, lights.
Don't bring that into the bedroom."
I'll just make a really quick comment, just hearing from what you're saying. So there's the aspect of your environment that can trigger some of these things, and what you're describing. Some people have certain toxicities, which is actually an area that I'm not going to go into great detail. But for an example, people that are exposed to like certain molds or other toxins. And I'm not saying that we would know what your condition is. You have to do testing and other things, but that's what.
I can't.
So something's driving your system. It's your fight or flight response, your adrenal systems, your cortisol. That's where these mechanisms kind of tie in. So you'd have to do like a full assessment to see that.
Right. That's autoimmune, and I think long-term COVID triggered rheumatoid in my ankle because I was up to 3 miles a day walking, and now I'm barely walking.
Well, thank you for your question, but that does help people think about things.
Okay, how about, I mean, certainly I have a lot of questions, but I wanted to first give the other panel speakers some opportunity to kind of talk about, what areas from your work you think it's relevant to healthy living and the future of healthy living and how we can tie smart cities together. So maybe we start with Dr. Lee.
Yeah. So I'm a internist practicing in Cupertino. Basically, for my idea about like being smart city, being healthy, being anti-aging. So you have to, like she mentioned, of course, enough sleep, enough exercise, and balance the diet. And everybody has different balanced diet. Somebody will tolerate this diet, somebody will not. So I think it's good to consult Dr. Mark for that part. And also sleeping, of course, everybody needs different amount of sleep. And research shows 7 to 9 hours sleep would decrease the mortality. If less than 7 hours or more than 9 hours will increase the mortality rate. So, and the quality of sleeping, you have to work on that too. And the exercise. So as a primary care, I always tell my patient, exercise, there's including a few aspects regarding the exercise. You have to work on your cardio, and you have to work on your muscle. That means like anaerobic, and another thing you have to work on your balance. So that's the third part. I will just input those much.
Thank you.
It's like yoga and Pilates.
Yeah, this is great.
Incorporate a myriad of.
Yeah, that I consider as a balance.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kashif Qadri. I'm a scientist by training with a focus in genomics and digital strategy, bioinformatics. So I work for a local biotech company focused around digital transformation, taking what was on paper and putting it in a digitized format. That helps in a number of different ways. I'll just highlight two. One is around molecular diagnostics, so being able to very quickly, efficiently, and in a reproducible manner analyze data to identify things like early screening for cancer, for instance, and then being able to transport that into other systems upstream, downstream, within an existing lab ecosystem. And the second area is around AI and ML, right? Everyone's talking about it from like a chatbot perspective, but there's a lot of value in being able to understand trends and large data from a data science standpoint. So that's kind of my focus, and excited to be on this panel.
Okay, Nikki.
Hi everyone, I'm Nikki Santo, co-founder and CEO of Swaza. And Swaza is a biotechnology company actually based here in San Jose that's developing a nanotechnology oxygen therapeutics platform. And one of our assets actually reverses low blood oxygen by inhaling it. So if you think about the 6 million people that died from COVID and the 50% of people that are in ICUs today, really low blood oxygen is the major factor driving that. So I'm here on this panel partly to talk about the need for technologies like ours and other actual physical assets, in addition to all the digital and AI assets that should be under development, because global cities are going to be populated by aging populations. And then we're coming out, I mean, the federal government just declared the public health emergency from COVID to be over earlier this week. However, we do know that respiratory illnesses and threats are going to continue to be a global problem, not just now, but into the future. So I think we really have to start thinking about an entire system where agencies like the FDA and EMA, and then also the investment ecosystem, can be stimulated to actually come up with solutions that will be relevant to the populations that are going to be inhabiting our cities in the future.
Can I ask?
That's great. Okay.
In Hawaii, I was there in my late 20s to my 30s as a newborn nurse in a little hospital, but we had an ER, and if somebody got the bends diving, we put them into a hyperbaric chamber. And it wasn't always guaranteed they were going to be okay. Is that something similar to what you're talking about?
The question was hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Actually, what we're talking about with our technology is actually negotiating the gas in the air through the edema that's in your lungs. But this is a topical treatment, so if you think about people with diabetes, for example, who have resistant wounds and ulcers, a lot of that is a problem with their vascularization. They're not getting enough oxygen to that site. So solutions like ours help with that. So we're just one of more companies that should be actually on the horizon doing this work. Unfortunately, I will say, because I've been to dozens of industry events now across the country and around the world, actually our startup ecosystem and our financing ecosystem for these kinds of assets is really narrowly limited to a few classes of drugs. That's why there's only been about 2,200 or so drugs ever approved all time by the FDA. That's since the Pure Food and Drug Act in the 1930s. So we're just not basically bringing innovations fast enough from academia and other innovation centers to where people need them.
Are you talking topical anesthesia like lidocaine? Are you talking topical anesthesia like lidocaine when you said topical?
Well, there's a topical application of oxygen therapeutics, so topical to the lung or topical to the skin, topical to the colon.
Or are they different?
It's different, and I'm happy to talk with you offline about the technology as well.
Great, thank you. Mike, it's not working. I think you have to really talk into it.
I'll try my best. For Dr. Rama, if you map someone's brain and you understand what their brain and how it's affected and what sort of their personality is based on the mapping, can any of that be reversed if they know how their brain works and how they can be treated? And if so, what can they do?
And it's a simple plot, so it doesn't tell us everything. But I find that if you restore that hidden order, people get better. So when people like you may come for insomnia, but our whole goal would be to restore that order. maybe your insomnia gets better, but your anxiety may get better, your ADHD, your mental. Well, I'm just throwing that out there, right? Your mental acuity, other things may get better, and then if anything's left over, we'll try to fix it. But so what I do is I am actively trying to find treatments. Maybe it's topical oxygen, I don't know, right? But I know we did a patient with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I sent them out, and they did 20 sessions, and we did it before and after, and their alpha started to restore. Only N of 1, but the reality is we have all these data, like the Fitbits and all these diagnostics that give us data, but how do you fix it? So what, right? So, I use that brain map as a method to normalize it. And I feel like if I normalize it, people are happy. Because in the end, your gut's important, this is important, but it's all up here. I mean, it's 6 inches, right here is where it impacts you the most. You want to be a good husband, good colleague, good father, just good community member.
What do you think about psilocybin?
I don't know much about it, but it slows the brain down.
No, it was a drug of choice for me when I was 20, and I really loved it. And I heard on my iPhone that they're using it in therapeutic doses, mushrooms in therapeutic doses for bipolar and long-term COVID. And my shrink wouldn't go for it.
Yeah, so, a brain that fires together wires together. So your primary rhythm is the alpha. If your alpha is trying to propagate through your brain, and you take a lot of medicines that slow the brain down, gabapentin, psilocybin, ketamine, whatever, it can degrade the alpha.
I know,
and so,
I'm allergic to 11 of them. I'm not taking another one.
Okay. Thank you. So I think we have pretty much already run out of time, but what I want is perhaps for our panel speakers to tell us, what your message is, your departing message. If there's one thing that you want us to take away today, walk out of here, what is that one thing that's really important that we should take home with us? So let's start with Dr. Lee or Nikki. How about Nikki first?
I think for this group, the one thing to take away, because with my clinician colleagues here, be aware and advocate for solutions that work for you and your communities, because they're sorely needed. The pie is big and the need is big, but there are solutions that people like my colleagues have come across and like our scientific team have developed. We just need to be able to get them to the community.
Oh, I think
Alpha,
yeah, the importance of alpha. I think for me it's just balance.
Oh, thank you. I think that the concepts that we have now about disease and what should be healthy and not healthy, we used to think that aging was a natural process, right? I mean, you look at your grandparents, you're naturally forgetful and everything, but we don't think of it that as a disease process. And I think we're beginning, and I want you to get this impression that you don't have to have these memory losses. You don't have to lose your sleep. You don't have to have metabolic energy issues, diabetes or weight gain. But, all these things that we used to take for granted and say, oh, it's just part of aging. You don't have to go through that now, because we know there's certain solutions that I've mentioned. So I want you to leave the room thinking that, things are not inevitable as you get older. You can have a longer life, productive life, and that you shouldn't, and you should seek solutions and not just be satisfied with the status quo, thinking that you're just going to be like your grandparents or somebody else that you know that's older.
Wow, what a powerful message. Don't be complacent, basically. That you can actually do something about aging, which is incredible. I'm sorry, we actually don't have any more time for questions, so maybe talk to the speaker after. I'm definitely going to. So, Kesha?
Yeah, as a technologist, kind of putting on that hat, I would say embrace technology, right? There was a comment by Dr. Rama about N of 1, but I'm sure N of 1s occur all the time, right? And the more we start collaborating, the more we start putting those data together, the more insights we have and all of us benefit, right? At the individual level, we all have our EHR, EMR access from our smartphones, right? Start embracing that. Start taking ownership of your data. It's really important. and make sure that you're advocating for the sharing of data, because if you switch from one provider to another, make sure that those data are transportable, make sure that they get your history, and make sure that you own that. So embrace the technology and take ownership.
Okay, from me, it will be balanced and be positive.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's thank the speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all attending.
All right, great. That concludes the session. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. If you want to talk to the speaker, please come up towards.